Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
So welcome back to another episode of How Leaders Behave. I'm Mark Hoare, and here's my friend and colleague, Peter Agnew. And we're going to be talking today about the supportive nature of inclusive leaders and the attributes that we can learn from them and some of the challenges that they may face. So how have you been, Peter?
Yeah, good, Mark. Looking forward to this one. This is a real leadership style that involves others. It's probably an over bias towards the people around them in some ways. So we sort of go through this process, and in this series we're using the 363 for leaders, or the 8 dimensions of leadership model.
Yep.
Always good to remind people where we're at when we start moving through the model. So we're probably at about 5 o'clock on the 8 dimensions model, and we use this to help break down the complexity of what leaders do in some ways.
I have to say, of all of the styles that I'm drawn to as a leadership style, it's the one I most respond to. It's most the one I'm most not. But a confident, strong, inclusive leader, one of the best on the planet, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And this one is these leaders have a real awareness of others around them.
Yep.
So they can tap into the emotional tapestry of the workplace, the fabric of what people are thinking within the workplace. And it's not called inclusive leadership for a reason.
I was going to say the clue's in the title, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really about that inclusiveness.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, as we go through this series, we are mapping our 8 dimensions to the Wiley product disc model, which for those who are watching the series will be familiar with.
Yeah.
The model sits over the 8 dimensions and helps us just give a little bit of a framework around what leadership is. 24 behaviours in the 8 dimensions model, and we're looking at the inclusive leadership down at the 5 o'clock point of the model. We'll be unpacking the 3 behaviours again, Mark, which is always good, but really looking to what this leader brings to the workplace. But where are the areas that this leader would stretch themselves in as we go through this series? So this particular style sits in the S style, doesn't it? It's that real sort of steadiness style, but it is around support and collaboration within the workplace as well.
Yeah. And that they're open, they're consistent. They've got some really great people skills because they're all about the people. They're awesome people.
So if we have a little bit of a walk through and start looking at the inclusive leader, some of the characteristics at their best.
Yep.
We talked a little bit there about a real sincere and accommodating style for the leader. Collaborative means that they want to make sure that they're really getting other people's input, doesn't it? So they'll collaborate with others. There's probably a couple of underlining reasons why they do collaborate so much, though, isn't there?
So the collaboration piece is they want the harmony piece. They really are looking for the input because they know that all of us is better than one of us.
Yeah, definitely.
The ego is really absent, which makes them highly effective.
Yeah.
And they are encouraging of even what might be considered a dumb idea, because there might be merit in something that they've never thought about.
Yeah, there's that point within the point about what can we really take from this and how can we be involved. But I suppose the flip side to that as well is a little bit about making sure that everyone does get involved and just doing that litmus test and check that people aren't not going to be heard, and maybe there could be a little bit of tension that arises because of that.
And the other thing, that last paragraph there about making decisions where everybody wins, they are about hitting the finishing line with the entire team lined up, and they all touch the tape at the same time.
Yeah,
they're not about winning and making their team look subordinate.
Yeah.
They really are about bringing everybody with them.
Yeah, in some ways it reminds me of the Jim Collins stuff in Good to Great around level 5 leadership. And the litmus test is you could take this leader out of the leadership team and the team will still really function well because there is that shared leadership across the team.
Yeah.
So inclusive leaders, as you say, are a little bit about checking ego and including everyone. And probably the leadership in this organisation, if it's an inclusive leader running it, will be about a team of leaders and it's about an organisational leadership approach rather than just the one style of leadership.
I had the pleasure of interviewing about 1,500 CEOs, and when you got to hear about the business and how well it was really tracking, when you complimented them on their organisation or their business, they were the first to deflect and say, well, look, thank you.
Yeah.
But it's not actually about me, it's about the team.
It's about
and
the
they
team.
mean it. They really do mean it.
Yeah. So the inclusive style is a really important part of leadership. It does have some downsides though, and we've got probably at their worst on our slide set a little bit sometimes about being a little bit passive or overly trusting of others. It's probably that being told by somebody that something's going to happen, or someone making a statement or a promise. The inclusive leader will 9 times out of 10 really go forward and sort of say, yeah, I believe that's going to happen. That will be followed through with, and really leaves it to the other person on their word in some instances around this style.
As we know, people are predictable in their unpredictability, and so I think one of the challenges of the inclusive leader is that they can be labelled perhaps as a little naive sometimes when it comes to trusting people to do what they said they were going to do.
Yeah, so at their worst in this section, that's probably something that pops out a little bit. Probably that other thing there about that patience is a virtue sometimes in workplaces, but the flip side of that, urgency matters sometimes as well, and driving a workforce forward and creating that sense of momentum in a team is going to be important for a team. So sometimes this can come across as a little bit too relaxed, maybe a little bit laissez-faire in this leadership style, that leaders in this, predominantly in this style, will need to stretch themselves out of occasionally.
Yeah, they can be perceived sometimes as hitting targets as an option.
Yeah.
Rather than something that is what we're about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's have a look at some of the other characteristics of the inclusive leader. And if we have a look at the 3 practices that they're probably the best at, these are going to be important for us. These people are really good listeners though, aren't they? And the staying open input is one of the 3 practices within our 8 approaches that this leader will be great at. Yep. So staying open to input is such a fundamental importance to people in workforces, that their leader really listens, that they have the opportunity to speak up and talk to the leader about bits and pieces. I suppose in a lot of other styles, leaders are very quick at cutting people off. Yeah. They're very quick at saying, no, that's not going to work. They're very quick at saying, no, that idea isn't going to be something that we can do.
I think one of their strengths is no ideas not worthy of consideration or worthy of being putting forward. And so it's something that probably the leadership styles to the Northern Hemisphere could really, really learn from. Yeah. Because they encourage that feedback. And if you've got somebody that does a job all day long, every day, the chances are they're going to know a lot more about it than you are. Yeah. And so if you want to know, go and ask them for their input. Yeah. Whereas so many other leaders from the Northern Hemisphere, if it's an idea that they've considered and written off, if somebody brings them that idea again, they're almost angry about it. Yeah. And so it stops people from bringing ideas to them.
So exactly right. And I think one of the really good examples that I like when someone gets the staying open to input as a development area, one of our roles as coaches is to give them input on their behavioural style, talk to them about some different ideas or suggestions. And I think for me, when I see this pop up as their number 1 development area, the staying open input area, I know I'm in for a bit of a hard coaching session. Yeah. It's that here I'm going to give you a little bit of input. Here's some results out of something like a 360-degree feedback process. And there might be that moment where you sort of give a couple of suggestions. Have you tried doing this? And usually will be, no, I've tried that.
It doesn't
work.
What
about doing this? Oh, no, that won't happen. That wouldn't work for me in this workplace. How about if you did this, what would that look like? Oh, no, our culture wouldn't be. And you sort of go through maybe 10 or 15 items and you sort of get to the end and you say, well, you haven't stayed open to any of my input. Could this really be a development area? Yeah. So people who are not good at this will usually shut things down quite quickly. You won't be able to have that process where input can be freely put onto the table and explored in some ways. So for leaders in this style, this is a really great attribute for them where they can stay open input. Yeah. And people feel listened to. And I think we've used the phrase a couple of times where there's no way in, there's no buy-in. Yeah. Inclusive leaders include everyone in the buy-in here, don't they?
Yeah. And that feeling part of the team is exactly what they're about, absolutely.
Yeah. So the second one that we can really learn from this leadership style is the diplomacy. And I suppose tact and diplomacy is a really important thing in leadership. I think when we do the high Ds or the dominant style in DISC, we get those high fives. I'm in that real sort of area of very forceful behaviour, but there's also that I like being direct and I like being unfiltered. This style is probably a little bit opposite to that. It's I don't want to be too direct, and I want to think out my words. I want to word my phrasing so that it's not going to cause offence or upset.
Yeah.
So they spend a lot of time in their language, planning their language out so it is diplomatic.
Yeah.
Important attribute in workplaces
And
as
I
well.
think, and that's why they're very easy to spot as leaders, because they are so very cautious about the words that they use, and that's why their words appear much slower than the D's or the I's or the commandings or the pioneerings.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the diplomacy piece for the inclusive leader is so much about not causing offence, and the irony is they probably would never anyway. And so it's a real oxymoron. Their biggest concern is causing offence, and the fact is that they never would because they're so optimistic and they're so inclusive. They would never say they would be. The challenge, I guess, is about that objectivity, but they're always going to say it well.
Agree. So this is another area that leaders can take from the inclusive leadership style into the workplace if they're not so strong in this particular dimension. That your words really hold a lot of weight, and your communication does matter. Sometimes if we are too direct and we're a little bit blunt or forceful, we may think, it's just a moment out in space where we've said something, but other people can stew over that for quite some time, and it can be sort of cause irreparable damage sometimes in workplaces where people are too forceful.
The thing with cliches is often they're right, but the thing about the diplomacy piece is that people will forget often what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's where this leader wins big time.
And I think I saw a little Facebook post during the week, a nice cute one about if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And it's sort of sometimes a little bit of a rule that these leaders will work by. There is going to be the flip side of that though, when there's problems to be addressed and so forth.
Which I'm sure we'll come to.
They will do tactfully in diplomacy still though. Sometimes can end up a bit coded. The third one that we can learn from this particular leadership style is about facilitating dialogue. And this is not so much the one-way communication, but the two-way communication. So dialogue is interactory, where it's between two or more people. And leaders in this particular area are really great at this. They're good at sitting down and having that moderate, calm and inclusive conversation.
It's that, all of us are better than one of us, which again, the commanding and pioneering leaders, and I suppose the Resolute could learn from. It is that there will be concepts and contributions.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.